Pirate Pete's Talk Like a Pirate by Kim Kennedy, illustrated by Doug Kennedy. Pirate Pete had the most amazing ship to ever sail the high seas, but it needed a crew. Not any old crew would do, however.
I needs me a pirate crew,
Pete told his parrot.
and I know just where to find one. Rascal Island.
To Rascal Island we go!
Cried the bird. Pete spun the wheel towards the Sea of Mischief, and soon his speedy ship had reached Rascal Island. Pete dropped anchor in the bay, and then he hung a sign across the ship's bow. Buccaneers wanted. Before long, a boat filled with rascals rowed up to the ship. Pete rubbed his hands with glee. They were the dirtiest, most mischievous, and sneaky-looking scallywags and scurvy dogs he'd ever laid his eyes on. One by one, the rascals climbed aboard the ship.
Listen up, mateys.
Announced the parrot.
If ye wants to sail with Pete, then ye've got to prove ye's got what it takes.
Pete nodded and declared.
You needs a peg leg and an old eye patch, a fierce-looking hook, and a beard you can scratch. You's got to load the cannon and know how to fire it, but most of all, you's got to talk like a pirate.
A rascal stepped forward, loaded the cannon, and fired it.
Nice firing,
Said Pete.
and I sees you got a peg leg, a hook, and an eye patch, and that beard of yours. Does it hankering for a scratch?
You know, it is quite itchy,
Answered the man.
especially during the summer months when the weather tends to be sultry.
Blow me down.
Bellowed Pete.
You don't talk like a pirate. Walk the plank.
As the man splashed overboard, Pete hollered.
Ye should have said, when the sun's a-blazing, me beard gets the itches, worse than a bucket of sand down in me britches.
Next!
Ordered the parrot. Pete squinted at the rest of the rascals and said,
You's gotta be stubborn and mighty cranky. You's got to be dirty and awful stanky. You's got to load the cannon and know how to fire it. But most of all, you's got to talk like a pirate.
A rascal stepped forward, loaded the cannon, and fired it.
Nice firing,
Said Pete.
and I see that you're plenty dirty and stanky. But is you stubborn and cranky?
Oh, indeed, replied the rascal. Sometimes I'm very irritable, especially when I don't eat my breakfast.
Shiver me timberers.
Shouted Pete.
You don't talk like a pirate. Walk the plank.
As the rascal went overboard, Pete cried,
Ye should have said, I'm as mean as a shark that's stuck in a tub when I've not scarfed down me morning grub.
Next!
squawked the bird. Pete glared at the rascals and said,
Ye's got to love treasure. Why, it's your duty to plunder ship and shore for gleaming booty. Ye's got to load the cannon and know how to fire it. But most of all, you've got to talk like a pirate.
A rascal stepped forward, loaded the cannon, and fired it.
Nice firing,
Said Pete.
and judging by the gold and the rubies you're flaunting, I reckon you done some plundered in your day.
That is correct.
Said the rascal.
I've misappropriated a number of fine jewels without permission.
Blimey!
Cried Pete.
You don't talk like a pirate. Walk the plank.
As the rascal leaped overboard, Pete shouted,
Ye should have said, I've pilfered loot on land and at sea, and no man said so has ever stopped me.
Next!
blared the parrot. Pete shook his head. He had finally lost his patience. He curled up his lip at the last rascal and declared,
You's got to trim the sails and mind the deck. You's got to be brave in case of shipwreck. You's got to load the cannon and know how to fire it. But most of all, you's got to talk like a pirate.
The rascal walked forward, loaded the cannon, and fired it.
Nice firing,
Said Pete.
but is you brave? 'Cause no lily-livered seafarer is gonna sail with me.
I can assure you that I'm extremely courageous.
Said the rascal.
I will conduct myself with valor at all times.
Confounded!
Shouted Pete, stomping his foot.
You don't talk like a pirate. Walk the plank.
As the rascal dropped overboard, Pete yelled,
Ye should have said, I've not a yellow-bellied bone from me head to me toes. I'll stand brave upon this ship wherever she goes. Can you believe it?
Pete moaned to his parrot.
Out of all of them rascals, not one was fit for me crew.
"This is true.
squawked the bird.
By the powers, they are no more than a bunch of squiffles and sprogs. None of them fit to go swashbuckling and plundering for pieces of 8 upon the briny blue on this here vessel."
Pete blinked.
Why, ye just talk like a pirate.
He cheered to the bird,
You're all the crew I needs. Weigh anchor.
"Aye, aye."
said the parrot, and off they sailed. Back to the high seas went Pete and his bird. A pirate always gets the last word. They looked for a crew so they could hire it.
But blimey, none of them could talk like a pirate.